Everybody. Welcome to our webinar this afternoon. We're going to give everybody a few minutes to join in. While we are doing that, if everyone wants to use the chat and let us know where you're dialing in from, that would be cool. I love to see, it's one of my favorite parts about doing a webinar is seeing where everyone's from. So I'm here. I'm Michelle from TribalHub. I am in Petoskey, Michigan. We have Oklahoma. Casey, where are you located at?
Well, I'm located in Laramie, Wyoming, but is where I'm based, but I'm in Phoenix, Arizona today.
Oh,
I'm
oh,
actually at
nice.
a conference. Yes.
Oh, cool. What about you, Colby? Uh-oh, can't hear you. No.
Test 1, 2, 3.
There you go.
Okay, I don't think I'm gonna be able to mute myself, but I was saying I'm currently in Virginia. So I used
Oh,
to live in
nice.
Laramie, but my wife and I moved to Virginia over the summer.
Nice. Jenny?
I am in Loveland, Colorado.
Oh,
So
goodness.
about an hour and a half south of Laramie.
Okay. And what about you, Sarah?
I'm up in Laramie as well.
Oh, gosh, cool. Awesome. Well, everyone, again, welcome to our webinar, When Good Implementations Go Bad, What to Watch For at the Last Minute. Special thanks to our partners over at HandleIT. You guys are wonderful, and we're so glad that you're here today to help us present this webinar. A couple of learning objectives for everyone to think about while we're going through the webinar here. Learning objective number 1, to identify last-minute obstacles that can jeopardize successful software implementations. And number 2, discover proven strategies and real-world tactics for overcoming these challenges and ensuring a smooth go live. During the webinar, please, you guys feel free to use the chat at any time. We'll be monitoring that, or you can use the Q&A feature if you don't want to put it in the chat for everybody. You will receive an email tomorrow with a copy of this webinar video. So if there's anybody on your team who maybe couldn't make it today, feel free to pass it along. We will also have it uploaded to our YouTube channel in the next couple of days as well. And with that, I think that's all I have on my end. So I'm going to turn it over to Casey.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'll stop sharing. I'll give you the controls.
I see my screen. Looks like it. Excellent. Thanks so much. Thank you, Michelle, for the introduction. As way of a little further, I'm Casey Bader. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Marketing today. I'm kind of going to be your moderator, and I'm joined by Colby Fenster, our Head of Customer Relations, Sarah Kajawa, and Jenny Schuster, who are project managers. And I'm going to pose questions and scenarios and then allow our resident experts to address those and how they might approach them, what they've encountered in the past, and what they've found to be good strategies for dealing with issues that might come up at the last minute. If you don't know who we are, Handle Information Technologies develops Right Track, which is software for tribal justice and social services. We're currently serving over 65 tribal nations, and we've been integrating complex software systems for over 25 years. So bringing to the table a lot of experience with these issues and how to turn crises into successes. Our agenda, we'll talk about what's the 11th hour for implementation. So 4 different spots that we've identified that these might come up, and I'll talk about those. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to discuss potential pitfalls and how to mitigate them. And with the goal of moving from managing crises to executing a transition, as Michelle said, there will be opportunity for questions and answers at the end. And if anyone is interested in the presentation that we've got here today, I want to mention that we have, I didn't want to go there yet. Not AI, better than AI. We have a Katie who is taking notes on the discussion that's going to happen today. And then we'll have follow-up slides for how it was discussed to mitigate these different situations. We've got a couple of surveys that we're hoping that you could take by scanning the QR code. The first is a question: where are you in your implementation journey? Are you in the middle of an implementation? I know as IT directors, you may be in the middle of multiple implementations, but just curious, if you're not in the middle of one, then you're, let's just say you're in the planning phase. And if you are in the middle of an implementation, where might you be? It doesn't look like anyone is necessarily in the midst of an implementation right now. Oh, all right, testing, good. Well, the lessons learned here will be useful for future implementations. Important for planning as preparation, as we'll wrap up with, is so important when we're looking to mitigate potential issues. Another question: how many system implementations have you been a part of? I think your question should come up. You don't have to rescan the QR code to answer this one. A few. More than 5. And that's one of the things I mentioned when I'm consulting with potential tribes who are going to work with Handle is you may be, depending on your role, if you're a director, you may be involved in a couple of implementations over the course of your career. If you're an IT director, of course, you're going to be involved in numerous. But it is something that's in addition for program directors, users, administrators who are involved in the implementation. It's in addition to their current role and position, it's our full-time job to work on implementation. So the experience that we bring in really benefits that, because we'll have best practices from instances that we've been involved with in the past. So we've got a wide variety of people that have been in multiple implementations, just a few or none. So defining the 11th hour for implementations, and there are 4, as I said, spots that we identified with different levels of urgency and different tactics depending on where you are in your implementation. So issues could arise pre-training. And these could be an accelerated time frame, as you know, these things could be happening over the course of a couple of weeks. Issues could be identified during final data conversion, and that's going to be the first thing that we talk about. At go live, and then also during post go live training or check-ins by our project managers to see, after going live, after training, how's everything going. Another one of the things that I'll tell prospects or customers is, after they go live, I envision our PMs and support department kind of like hockey goalies in the goal. They're waiting for the pucks to start coming in, because everything's really easy when the trainers are there and everyone smiles and nods during training and they're getting it. And it's different when Colby or Sarah or Jenny are gone the next Monday and they're at their desk and having to do it on their own. Things are going to be discovered, and that's anticipated. And so how do we roll with those? So our first pitfalls that we're going to talk about is unforeseen migration and integration breakdowns. One could be data formatting issues, and that's discovering corrupted, missing, or incompatible data formats just before the final import. So identifying things in the legacy database that are not going to translate over into RightTrack or your other system, your new system, due to bad data. Data integrity can also be an issue, and this is one that can come up later on because the conversion may not identify missing or incorrect data. That's not going to be discovered until users are actually in the system, but it can, through testing and review, identify missing or incorrect data that is going to be converted, and how do we deal with that? And then if we're integrating with other systems, if upon live load, the integrations are failing or slow, and discovering that upon going live, how do we address those things? So I'll open it up to our panel to talk about any of these. My quick answer, if I was to be on the panel, is I would just say we have a Chad. And that usually takes care of all the things for us, but not everyone has a Chad, and that's not a sufficient answer. So I'll let you guys talk about that.
Yeah, just from my kind of experience, I can jump in. I think especially for data migrations and stuff, the biggest thing to prevent this is communication throughout the entire conversion process, and getting staff to buy in of the importance of that testing during the imports and stuff. One other thing I'd say with some of those issues and everything, it's really important for not only the vendor to review the data as a part of the conversion, they should review it with the client themselves. The client should hopefully be the expert in their own data and stuff. And so that's where, by reviewing it together, you can make sure that things are coming over correctly. They do make sense, just because the vendor may not be entirely an expert in the process yet of the client and stuff. The other thing I would say, as a part of that review, doing side-by-side comparisons is a huge benefit. So essentially, you would have a copy or replica of the new system, or the data where the data is going to go up, and then you would have a copy of the existing data or the old data, on the other screen. And it's just kind of a matter of going through different records, making sure information's coming over as you expect. And it's kind of hard, you want to do kind of some random picking or a comparison of records and stuff. We normally recommend doing some old records, so records maybe 10 or 15 years old, some in the middle, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and then some of the date records that you just entered the other day or right before that import or backup was taken. And then with that too, you also want to do some comparisons of the actual number of records coming over. Hopefully your vendor can provide examples of like, hey, you have 1,000 case files in your current system. We were to bring over 852. And then you as the client and the vendor can work together to identify, why are we missing almost 150 cases? Is it things where the data is missing? Like Casey mentioned, do we have data integrity errors? We've sometimes ran into that with other integrations where, we expect date of births to be behind or past the current date, and somebody may have a date of birth that was a typo and it's in the future. And so, certain systems may have validation in place that prevents that data from coming over. And so that way, those reports can be provided to the client, and the client can either fix those data entry mistakes, or as a part of the import, the vendor can make sure they modify or correct the data prior to getting to that import phase. And then with that too, it's also important during that review to check all of the field values. It's not necessarily the most fun thing to do because it's very repetitive, and it's not super exciting to sit there and make sure, one field has one value and it matches the other one. But it's super critical to do that, and just thinking of making sure it makes sense. I personally had an import before where we were mapping hair color and eye color over as a part of some demographic data. And when I first looked at it, I saw some colors and I was saying it's all good and everything, it all matched. And then as the client was reviewing it, they realized they had a lot of people with pink, or not pink, hazel hair and blue hair and things like that. And we had realized that we had accidentally mapped the hair color to the eye color field and the eye color to the hair color field. So just things like that where, you may not really catch that when you're just looking at the data from afar, but once you dive into comparing those fields at a field by field level, you'll kind of catch those mistakes and stuff. And then with that too, the other things with the integrations that I would say is having a rollback plan in advance, and make sure you do a couple of test runs and at least a full test run a day or two prior. I wouldn't want a client to say, hey, we're just going to go live, good luck, without having a chance to review the data and stuff. And so just having some of that planning in place of what happens if this does fail. Are we going to go live Monday? Are we going to delay another week to fix it? Just making sure that's all discussed prior. And then hopefully to kind of not need that rollback plan, you can do a almost full conversion the week or a few days prior. And that way you can catch any mistakes or errors with data in advance before it's that final day and it's a rush to get everything corrected. So, Jenny and Sarah, I don't know if you have any other thoughts or opinions on some of the stuff you've seen with migrations.
I think you covered all of it. Really, I can't think of anything else to contribute to that one. That's really everything that I've ever encountered, and makes the world a difference when you meet all those steps. So.
Yeah, I
Awesome.
agree. I agree. Communication is key throughout the whole process, but yeah, just being open to having those conversations, meeting as many times as needed, making sure, the more work you do on the front end, the smoother it's going to be when you actually implement it.
And then the only thing I might add to is with some of that integration, especially if you're integrating with another software, so you're not necessarily switching systems, but you're making sure data gets passed from one system to another. That's obviously can be a big issue because vendors can run into well, it's not my problem, it's the other vendor's fault. They need to fix it. Just make sure you have really good documentation with your vendors, or your vendors have that documentation to be able to provide, no, I've checked our logs, we're saying connection failure, so we can't connect to their side or vice versa. Because I've had that happen a few times where clients feel like they get stuck in the middle, because they're the ones communicating with both vendors and each vendor's kind of blaming the other side. And so just breaking down that communication again and making sure if a vendor is saying that, they're able to back up their words, with proof, or can hopefully explain it in layman terms if it's something a little bit more technical, rather than just saying, not my problem.
Describe data migration or integration process is it's iterative. We're going to run through and do data mapping and then do a conversion and test and look and identify issues and expect iterations of a data conversion in order to get it to the place so that everyone is confident in it just before going live. Just one of the processes that I know that you guys use and Chad and his team do, identifying bad data in those iterations, running reports and providing them to the customer before so that they can identify, oh, I'd like to go in and manually fix this missing or incorrect data, or we'd like you to batch update these different records and just infill some value that we've selected that then we can work with after the fact. But as Jenny said, preparation is key, communication is key, and testing and getting eyes on it from the customer side is going to ensure that this goes as smoothly as possible.
Yeah. And I guess just to speak on your first comment there, Casey, I think it probably would be expected that most conversions probably go through 4 to 5 iterations of reviewing the data. You kind of have your initial one where you're just hoping things are coming across, and then you're probably going to have 2 or 3 following of just correcting different mistakes or errors as people find them.
Sure. All right, and we started with details in the data. Also, get my security oversights. No, yes. Okay, sorry. Security oversights. These can occur, and I know that this first one, insufficient user access, and also even the second can occur when you're working with a director or higher level persons and you don't have end users at the table at some point in time during the implementation. And so when they're released into a system where their permissions were assigned by somebody else, they can find they don't have the necessary access to do their jobs. The system is locked down too tightly, and people can't do their jobs. And while the security settings made sense in real world situation, things are going to have to be modified. The other side of that, of course, is users have access to information that should be confidential to their group. And again, security is very detailed, and so it's easy to make mistakes. I know testing is very important, but as far as how to head off, either of these, people not having necessary access or too much, what are our recommendations?
I can kind of start with that. I'd say really having the director involved from the get-go and understanding what exactly the system is doing is probably the most important thing when it comes to security, just because they'll have a better idea visually of what a user is going to see in the different roles and stuff, and if some of that security needs to be implemented or not. We've had a couple of clients that want to block caseworkers from seeing cases that they have access or that may be involving a family member, for confidentiality reasons and stuff. So it's just kind of figuring out those edge cases and understanding that someone is going to need to have the overall permissions, to kind of handle those cases. If all staff besides the director need to be blocked from a case, we need to make sure we're aware of that. Or even just having policies in place internally that say, hey, if you're looking up data that you shouldn't be looking up, that's obviously an issue instead, rather than forcing the software to do it. Vendors should be able to hopefully do both, but those are just things to kind of think about when it comes to some of that security oversight.
Or even reviewing security with just about everyone. I know Colby mentioned managers, but I've seen it plenty of times where I go through with managers and we get the day-to-day employees in who know what their jobs, their day-to-day roles are, and then they can't do what they need to be able to do. So ongoing security, especially right after implementation, that's usually when I find myself adjusting security most often, with the initial implementation of security going with supervisors and then creating basically a list of information of, well, this group needs to be able to see X. Let's meet and go through security again and see if we want to give group X permission to be able to see this information. So it's an ongoing process too.
I also think with larger implementations where you have multiple departments kind of managing the data, it's really important to have kind of that overall decision maker that can actually decide, who can see what. We do a lot of work with like enrollment departments and ICW departments and stuff. And we've gotten into quite a few, we've had our clients get into quite a few discussions between those two programs of, enrollment wants all of their data privatized, which is understandable, but ICW needs that information. They need to be able to see somebody's name, their date of birth. It's really beneficial for the ICW program to be able to see that somebody's enrolled or not enrolled. And so, if you have a centralized system like that, having somebody that can step in and say, no, it is all right that this department can see if they're enrolled or not enrolled. We don't need to grant them full access to the entire enrollment record, but we can at least give them a field or something to indicate that. That way that they're not having to, call the enrollment department every day to verify that somebody's enrolled. They can just log into the system and instantly see that. But sometimes when you have those discussions between two departments and stuff, you kind of get stuck in a discussion or maybe a refusal for somebody to cooperate or share that data. And you either need an overall decision maker to override that, or you're going to have to work with the department that technically owns the data. And if they don't want to share it, then you'll have to, work with the other department on a way that they can get access.
Something that I have found some success with is that when I'm working with a client that does have multiple departments, I meet with the sort of decision maker, go over all of those big things, and then I meet with each department individually to better understand their processes, take a lot of notes, and then either include their boss or director, what have you, or circle back with that person later and say, okay, this person was telling me that this is their process. You indicated that you might want to block some access. Here's sort of where we're running into this mismatch. What do we need to do to make sure that we're on the same page? Being in a previous life, being on both the receiving end, of this, I definitely can understand how sometimes the end user, their boss just might not quite understand every little bit that they do in their job. And so it's really important to make sure that you're sort of matching those needs while also maintaining procedures and policies. And sometimes that ends up being a discussion in real time amongst the group of what makes the most sense and cleaning up some of those processes. But I found a lot of success getting them to be more open about their processes and help have a successful rollout that way.
Yeah, I think you touched that great point, Jenny, especially of doing that at the very beginning of the project too. That way it's not coming to the final 11th hour and all of a sudden we're having to have these security discussions. I think it's great that you're bringing it up right away with those departments, not to make it awkward or anything, but just to know that without discussing that right away, you may run into those issues later on.
I think that initial things are very important, and I think you both mentioned policies and procedures. Those are things that are defined internally, that you define before ever working with the vendor, and then telling the vendor, here is our data sharing policies and procedures. They may not be perfect, but at least you've put heads together, made requests, hashed out, differences, and hopefully have somebody with authority that can make a final decision about how permissions should be assigned. But know that moving forward, things can change. Not everybody gets everything perfect the first time around. When you get multiple, a dozen or more eyes and hands in the system, then things arise much differently than they were in theory. In theory and practice are two very different things in an implementation, and recognizing that the realities might have to be shifted from the original theories is important.
Yeah, and one thing I think to kind of add on to that, if you to alleviate some of those concerns of once that security is in place, hopefully your vendor has the ability to provide audit trails, whether that be data manipulation or view access audit logs and stuff. So that way, if there is a concern of some of that shared information like a date of birth or a contact information, if a department keeps updating an address to the wrong address or something like that and it's impacting another department, obviously hopefully the vendor can provide that information to the tribe, and then work with the department heads to identify, is it a malicious intent, is it an employee that just needs some additional training and needs to understand that what they're doing does impact other departments, or is it something else?
Anything else? Okay, we're going to go from details to higher level. And we call this one delays from on high. Sometimes that means that stakeholders aren't aligned. Those policies and procedures may still be in flux. They haven't been identified yet. And so requests for changes made for one group may cause frustration for another. And so you're having different programs not agreeing about what should be shared. Another one can be lack of sign off from leadership, and that is getting to the 11th hour and going to council or administration for approval of the final go live, and finding that council or administration had a different vision or understanding of what was going to be done, and how to mitigate those things can be more difficult. Some of it probably out of our hands, but things that the customer can do as well to ensure that everybody's on the same page. We do as much as we can, but and what are those things that we try to do more of?
Sure, I think I'd say one of your clients recently with the name change of the system might be a good example to go over.
Yep, that was exactly the one I immediately thought of. So I have one client where I'm not even going to go with, probably close to half now. Half of them, you can display names different ways in a system. Half of them wanted it to be like my name, Sarah Elizabeth Kujawa. Others wanted it to be Kujawa, Sarah Elizabeth. So I would change it in right track to be one way, and then we would release it. And then I would immediately get emails from those that preferred it the other way, asking me to take it back. And then we'd take it back. And then the other group would be upset that now first names first instead of last. So it's things like that where you're trying to make everyone happy. And because not everyone, I should say, seems to do everything the same way, or the information displayed the different ways even can, make an impact for one department over another. I found that more of my financial groups, they prefer that last name. Last name is very important to them for all of their reports, where a lot of the case management side of things, they're doing a lot more of how you would read a traditional name. So it's definitely something to work through, and it is, for all intents and purposes, easy to work through if you can get the correct people into the same conversation for everyone to have a discussion at once. The back and forth like that just ends up leading to frustration from all parties involved, from the vendor to the client to the department that all of a sudden had everything changed on them when it was, in their eyes, finally right. So that's definitely something that is easy to, especially in a large, like what Colby was explaining, those that use multiple departments using the same system, getting multiple departments. And in this case, that particular one is 10 plus departments using Right Track. Getting all those departments on a call at one time can be difficult, but in cases like this, it's kind of necessary to figure out what's the best course of action. In a lot of cases, for Right Track here, we were able to come up with a pretty good solution for them that'll allow their users to have control over how they see names, last name first or first name first. So problem solved. You guys they'll be able to choose it there, but it definitely leads to a lot of frustration and a lot of back and forth that probably didn't need to be there to begin with, if we would have had the conversation with all of those involved to begin with.
And that's something, even as I feel like project managers, we kind of learn to ask those questions after we've unfortunately had to learn that type of lesson with the client. I remember this is more of a minor issue, but we had a report that was being generated and I had the font be Arial and the client needed it Times New Roman. And so we had to go update, all the different reports to the new font. And it was one of those things of like, really, it doesn't matter, but nope, it does. So we'll get it changed and corrected. But yeah, that's just a big thing that you can run into. You may not realize a thing as simple as a name change matters until you it is, or I should say. I think the other thing that kind of can tie into that as well is getting those decision makers to continually be involved from the get-go. I know a lot of times when we take over projects from the sales side of things to now where we're doing the design, it's a really massive project on the client side. They just had to do all this work with the contract and everything and getting it approved. And it's almost like they want to take that, break or that sigh of relief of I finally did it. And unfortunately, really the project's just kind of beginning at that point. And we still need that buy-in, for the next several steps and everything. And I totally understand that can be a lot of burnout because the contracting piece is its own gigantic project as well. But just knowing that, we do need that buy-in the full way through, or if you can provide that buy-in, it does make that process a whole lot easier and makes kind of some of the sign-off or lack of leadership, it's not really a thing with that understanding of, yeah, once we got it approved, we still got a lot of work to do.
The communication and ongoing, I think a couple of things that I've seen be successful is, even if you don't invite all end users, all, whatever their role is to the table during design, have internal regular meetings with them to expose them to what is going on. Take their feedback, even if it doesn't end up being something that changes the system, so that you can address those as you're going through the process internally. So meetings with the end users, here's where we're going with this, here's the development that's occurred so far, here's what you can expect. And then also, when available, if there's monthly council meetings, updates there so that they're in on the process as well. And they're not surprised when you come to them 6 months later and they're unhappy with something that could have been identified well before.
Yeah, I think another thing to keep in mind with all that too, throughout that whole process, especially when you have those multiple stakeholders and at a client say this is our goal necessarily shouldn't be making our department better than your department. It should be making our members' experience overall better rather than just with one department. So kind of that trade-off of, this may make our jobs a little bit harder, but it's going to benefit this other department, and overall it's going to benefit our member even more.
Great point. Looking at the eventual outcome, what is this system supposed to do for your members, and what's the best way we configure it and share information in order to do that? Great point, Colby. Another high level pitfall, and this is going to come post training, is the "we don't like it" backlash. Change management is a real thing, and a real thing both internally and something that we can kind of contribute to or help to. But people have their old processes, and even if they're inefficient, they're what they know. And when you take away that competency, then people feel like they're incompetent in a new system, and they can want to just revert back to old processes. The other one is the "how do I," and that kind of goes back to everybody smiles and nods during training. And then when they're back at their desk doing it themselves, things are a little bit different and they don't remember things. So maybe the training wasn't specific enough, and you've got a high support volume at launch, more of those hockey pucks than you anticipated. And kind of how do we deal with those that are just resistant to using the new system in general, or those that find that they don't quite understand what they need to do after going live?
I know for me, I do, everyone has encountered both of these scenarios if you've launched a project off the ground there. So specifically the "how do I" is something I really like to be proactive about. Of course, we do training, but then I make sure that they have something that they can pull up if I'm unavailable. And so I do make a lot of what I call job aids, which basically gives them step-by-step directions on how to do everything I just taught them to do. So should I not be available, they're at home trying to create a new case and they do not remember where to start, they have something they can quickly pull down to have that, "oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. It is midnight. I'm just trying to get this in here. Sarah's not available at midnight." It kind of empowers them and puts that back on them that, okay, you do have some resources available to you when I'm unavailable to answer these questions. So that is something that I have found works really, really well to help with the "how do I" after the fact, should I be unavailable. The "we don't like it," of course, is another thing.
Yeah, I think another good way, like you mentioned, Sarah, is just understanding your employees' learning styles as well. Obviously we have some people that prefer that hands-on training. So when we're there, or, doing a meeting, walking through how to do that, that's all they need. But then understanding that may not work for those employees that need something visually to read or see or reference, versus even others that need it more auditory, and need a video that they can listen to or watch and stuff. And so just either working with your project manager or your vendor to have some of those job aids, like Sarah said, in advance, I think is a great way to circumvent some of these issues. The other thing too is I try and stress this a lot during my trainings, is please don't be afraid to ask me questions. It's my job to know right track or the system, so it's supposed to seem really easy to me. With that change or understanding that it is different now. It's kind of like in school, a teacher can't necessarily help you unless you let the teacher know you're struggling and stuff. And that's kind of how I tell my clients and stuff of, I don't want to make your job harder, but I can't solve any problems unless you communicate those issues or struggles with me. Because, I want to make sure then we can get those addressed, whether I'm being too broad or not specific enough or too wordy. That's something I run into sometimes, is I try and over explain things when the person's just needing a more simple explanation. And yeah, that's a great way to address the "how do I" panic.
The other
Sure.
thing that I would just say is that consistency and practice are key. When my son was in kindergarten, I remember his teacher used to say, practice makes permanent. And I love that saying. My son is almost 16, and I still say it to him. I say it internally to myself: practice, 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 and give yourself grace to not be perfect right away, or to go through some of those sort of growing pains and frustrations. We've all had those moments where we've opened an application, whether it's social media or how you pay your bills, or a database management system or a CRM like RightTrack is, where we log in and something looks different. The user interface looks different, and we all shake our heads and, oh, why did they make this change, or why are we doing this? But it's the more you do it, the more you practice, the better that you get, and the more confident that you get. And so it's just about using those resources, tapping into the resources that you have, that have been provided to you by your system or your boss, and just doing it consistently to become more confident and effective using the new system.
I think that too, on the
Go
as I
ahead.
said, on the management side of things, of even then knowing, like, okay, how do we have, how do I know that my employees are struggling and things like that? I think just having that open communication is super important. And then I think all three of us really like to do those post go live check-in meetings right after the system goes live. So, if you go live on a Monday, we're going to let you, kind of experience it for a day. If you're running into major issues, we're available via phone and email to hop on and get those resolved, but then try and set up a check-in meeting, the next day, Tuesday or Wednesday or something like that, where employees can come in with those concerns or those struggles and get some of those topics addressed. And whether that's additional one-on-one training with that specific employee, or a change in the process, because now that people are actually using it or attempting to use it, we're realizing it's not quite what it needs to be. That's all great to have as well for those post go live check-in meetings. And it's not like that has to happen once. I tell my clients usually, I like to imagine for the first 3 to 4 months after a go live, I'll try and be communicating with you once a week, if not more. Then hopefully after that, we can roll it back to maybe once every other week, because we're stable, everything's good to go. And then eventually even once a month, because it's not as, at that point everyone's familiar, and it's really just making new changes as new data points are needed, or new employees are hired. And Sarah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
it's okay. No, for the we don't like it, I've experienced that as well. And for me, when I start to see that going down that path, because it's very evident when the everyday users of the system are going down a path of, I kind of want the old system back. At that point, I have found that getting then management excited over it is key. It's really hard as a the day-to-day employees to not use something if your manager is excited about it and wants to use it. If supervisors and upper management aren't excited about the project, then why would I be excited? Is basically what I have seen most frequently happen with that. Otherwise, if I can keep excitement up with supervisors, managers, upper leadership, I find that excitement trickles down to everyone else. So that's all I was going to say on the we don't like it bit, is go for the managers then if they start to go down that path.
Yeah, I also think keeping your staff engaged in that, like Casey said, it's kind of a fine line of getting everyone involved through that design process, because you might have too many people giving feedback or wanting it one way versus another and stuff. But once you are closer to that go live stage of getting staff involved and maybe making some of those smaller decisions as a group can make it feel like it's their system, not just a system that they're being told to use and stuff. It's more personable to them. And I think also, Sarah, adding on to your having supervisors or management excited and also engaged with the training process, that's also super critical. I had a training where I could see the group was kind of getting bored. And so the only way I could make it super exciting is I was trying to make us play this game called Sparkle, which I did in spelling class, where you had to say a letter of each word and then If you made a mistake, you were out. And so we did that with every single click in the system. And when we got to the manager, they didn't know what to do. And so it was one of those things of we could have lost the group very easily, because it was like, oh, the manager doesn't know what to do. But that group actually turned it into some good teasing where they were like, oh, it's these next steps. See, we got this down, and it can make it a little bit more fun. So.
I think also being willing to explain the why and the benefits, especially if you are transferring from an old system or an old process, and that can be really hard and that can be mentally exhausting for some people. Explaining the why, this is going to help us have better data. This is going to allow us to apply for more grants and have more funding to, do this or do that, get more employees, build a new shelter, or whatever it might be. Explaining the why behind that. I think a lot of people, they're open to change, but they want to know the why behind it and the positive impact that that is going to have. And being willing to talk about that, I think, is really helpful.
I 100% agree. And I think that's the unfortunate part, or the last step is kind of on sometimes supervisors and managers need to not be afraid to be the boss. But I think if that why kind of trickles in, you kind of avoid that. I had a client with multiple court clerks, and after we were going live with their training and system, one, kind of flat out told me, I'm not entering my cases into this. It's way too long. There's no benefit of me. I don't see the statistics. I don't really care about the statistics. And I didn't really have a way to tell them, no, you need to be entering that. And so, within the first 6 months of their go live, only 2 of the 3 case types were being entered into the system. And then within 6 months, only 1 of the case types was being entered. And then within 9 months, no one was entering any more data into the system because it was, well, they're not having to do it. Why should I have to do that? And then the whole project kind of ended up being scrapped because we didn't have somebody to step in and say, no, you need to do this. And I think having that manager step in to say, well, here's the data that we're collecting and this is what we're going to be able to do with it. And it doesn't even have to be data related, like on the court clerk side or the court side. I was trying to, say, well, we can generate the docket automatically for you. We can generate these court orders and stuff for you. You have all that information in the system. We just need you to take the 10 minutes to enter it initially or whatever. But that was too much of a burden rather than, having to retype the same information over and over again. That would end up taking, hours when you looked at the lifetime of a case. That message just didn't really come across, and not having that buy-in led it to the project not being successful.
Right. Finding champions, and I can see those sometimes during the sales process. Like I'll get through and go through multiple demonstrations and know like Karen is on fire. She wants to go live next week. As soon as the beta site's up, she's going to be in there. Stephanie, on the other hand, is adverse. She has concerns. She's afraid she's going to break it. I know we say you can't break it. If you do, it needs fixed. But identifying those champions who understand the why and are willing to say, this is the benefit that it's giving to me and others, and kind of let that enthusiasm grow throughout an office or program. If you can identify those, and really importantly, that you guys all said that you want the people that are the champions and the early adopters to be the managers, so that people see their leadership accepting and taking on their roles in the system, and they feel obligated and maybe even excited to do so as well eventually. Okay, thank you. Great. I have one more survey, and that is, which issues cause you the most stress before go live? Looking at the situations that we've identified, what have you run into? I'm sure it's many years for me since I did project management, but I know that you can encounter all of these in one project. Hopefully not, learning over time not to do that, but delays from leadership and administration. We recognize how important those are, and how they can put a wrench in what we're trying to do. User resistance is another strong one. Data migration training gaps. Good to see that I don't know if it's good to see, interesting to see that others have encountered the same challenges that we have and that we're talking about today. Thank you guys for completing that survey. And although we're just about to wrap up, I do have a bonus scenario. And if you call now, you can have another for free, just pay shipping and handling. And this is that leadership changes course. Leadership wants something other than what they've defined and purchased, and they understand. We know that we told you that we want this and we want it to work that way, but over the course of the implementation, or because there's new leadership or administration, they don't want what they told you they wanted, and they're willing to pay for the changes and accept the delay, recognizing, yes, this is on our end, but what can you guys do for us now that we're delaying this? And you know, if it's coming from leadership and they're waving a check, we're going to do it, but there's stuff to mitigate on the ends where you've got departments that were excited or that were ready to go, and now there's going to be a delay. You know, how do you try to keep them in the fold when you're going to have to be making maybe some large scale changes that are going to take some time, that has come down from on high?
I think being just open and upfront with those departments and stuff, or those users, that this is the situation that's happening, and you know, while it's probably not fun for anyone involved, that's the reality of the situation. And so you want to, I always say, it's not my job to make your job harder, and if I am, then I'm not doing my job and stuff. So kind of getting in their feedback then. So if those changes do happen, it's kind of that feedback again, or feedback loop of, let's get you involved with some of these design decisions and stuff. That way, again, we're making this more of a software designed by you, not just a software that you're being told to use and stuff. And then in terms of delays and everything like that, it's just one of those then of understanding that, you know, you can only move so fast and everything, but hopefully the vendor is able to kind of build a schedule or a project plan to kind of outline that and keep everyone accountable. That way, you know, it doesn't kind of reach one of those constant delays or keep, you know, things keep changing. And then also managing scope creep, I think, is another important thing as well, of, you know, a PM being able to say, hey, we understand you want this, but we see the benefit of you getting into the system now is going to pay off more than you know, delaying this another 3 to 6 months because you just want one other thing to work or one other piece of functionality. You know, the sooner we can get people in the system, I think the better off you have higher buy-in between your employees and stuff, and more success long term.
Key takeaways that I hope that you all recognize from the discussion today is that preparation pays off. Really, you can't put too much time in at the beginning of the process, you know, in preparation, both internally with policies and procedures, and with putting the right people at the table to put thought into your security and data conversions. So recognize that the first steps aren't always the most fun, but if you put in the proper time, then the later steps are going to go much more smoothly. And when you're at the 11th hour, things are going to go as expected. Barriers are natural and not deal breakers. You're going to encounter barriers, whether those are technical, you know, working with bad data, working with a bad vendor, on the other side of an integration, working with user resistance. Those are all natural, and it's just finding a way to best mitigate those. throughout all this discuss. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, just to add on to that, I think that's a great thing to also kind of touch base on is like we call those showstoppers on our end of, you know, I've had clients before where the system's 99% ready to go, but we maybe have one form that's not generating quite or correctly, and it's going to take us, you know, 2 to 3 weeks to get that fixed. You know, can staff manually generate that one form for those 2 to 3 weeks while they're able to do the 99% of the benefit and stuff? You know, obviously I'd want a mistake-free system and everything, but it's kind of those abilities to, it's not a deal breaker. We can't use the system just because this one thing's not quite there yet. We can still use it and know that those other things will get fixed eventually.
Yeah,
that's all I was gonna say.
No, recognizing that, you know, we've got 99% ready to go. Let's not delay for the 1%. Let's add that in as we go and get the majority of the users in doing everything that they can, because they're getting the adoption. Preparation or practice makes permanence, and we want to start that practice as soon as possible. You guys all mentioned about how collaboration is critical. Collaboration within the tribe and the programs, collaboration with your vendor, collaboration between managers and end users, and the different programs if you're talking about an integrated system. Communication and collaboration is going to be necessary to ensure that the process is smooth as possible. And system adoption is a journey. You know, you're not going to have everybody excited the first day, but, you know, after the first month, do people recognize the benefit and are they buying in? And you're having the majority of users adopting the system. It may not happen overnight, but it will happen with the proper care. I know that can mean a lot of care from Sarah, Jenny, or Colby, hand-holding, if you will. But if that's necessary, then, you know, that's what brings those users to the final state of adoption. And I stole this from Tiffany, but and maybe one of you, I know that you guys helped with the case study that is available after this webinar, but success doesn't come from luck. It comes from preparation, adaptability, and communication, as you've all elucidated as we've went through today. I know we're very close to our hour. And so I will open it up to any questions that Michelle may have fielded. And thank you all for taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, this is really great. I actually don't have any questions that you haven't already covered.
Okay.
Just a comment I'd like to say is, you know, you can really tell when you guys were going through all of this, your experience in working through these with tribes. You know, tribes are a lot different than a commercial enterprise, and that makes a big difference when you're working with a partner who understands that. And you could really see it through how you were answering and like the different things you were talking about and your experiences pulling on some of those for this. So I just really loved that. And I'm sure our audience did as well, you know, what listening in. So no, this was wonderful presentation. Thank you guys for partnering with us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Michelle. We appreciate it working with TribalHub and everybody taking the time to join us. Hopefully it was informative. If you don't want to scan for that case study, you'll receive a link to it. And of course, TribalHub will do follow-ups with the video, as Michelle said. I think that's all we've got for today.
Awesome. And I put in your email, Casey and Colby, in the chat if anyone wanted to reach out. Jenny and Sarah, I couldn't find your emails quick enough to put them in there. But if anybody needs to reach out to them, you could always contact us at TribalHub. Happy to put you in contact with anybody. And with that, everybody, have a great afternoon. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.